The afternoon sun bathed the wide sidewalks of Magnolia Grove, a gated subdivision on the outskirts of Houston, Texas. White fences, pristinely trimmed lawns, and gleaming SUVs parked in every driveway painted the picture of the American dream. To any passerby, nothing seemed out of place. But on that Saturday afternoon, something was about to shift, and none of the neighbors would ever forget what followed. At 327 Willow Creek Drive, Marcus Daniels was kicking a ball with his 8-year-old son Elijah, while his wife Denise tended to the potted plants on the porch. Marcus, 43, was the kind of man who deliberately stayed under the radar. Neatly trimmed beard, simple clothes, calm eyes, unassuming posture. The neighbors knew him as a reserved, hard-working man who rarely attended HOA social events, yet always greeted people kindly. From across the street, behind heavy curtains at House 322, Linda Whitaker watched them. She was the HOA president, and she took great pride in emphasizing that this neighborhood was a model of order and standard. Linda took that seriously, very seriously. Since Marcus moved in 2 years ago, she had been watching him more closely, not just because he sometimes left his garage door open or allowed his grass to grow a bit longer than the rules. Something deeper, something unsettling, something she never spoke aloud, but felt. A disquiet that was growing like a weed. He did not seem submissive. By the end of that day, Marcus sensed the air change. He paused mid-kick, as though he felt a tremor only he could perceive. Denise looked up and smiled, unaware of the silence that had settled into his expression. At the neighborhood entrance, a black SUV with a generic insignia pulled in. 2 figures stepped out, dressed in uniforms mimicking security forces. Black shirts, tactical pants, radios on their shoulders, and plastic badges hanging. The emblem on their vests read, Neighborhood Compliance Enforcement. They walked with firm steps toward the Daniels home, and just behind them, approaching with quick but determined strides, was Linda. Notebook in hand, glasses sliding down her nose, face hardened by someone who would not tolerate deviation. Marcus paused his play. He looked directly. There was no confusion in his face, only calculation. As though, in that moment, he had connected pieces of a puzzle he had already been assembling. Denise frowned. "Who are they?" she whispered. Marcus said nothing. He simply walked to the edge of the yard, extended his neck, and watched Linda approach with those 2 men. She offered a smile. That thin, false smile, coated in passive-aggressive venom. "Good afternoon, Mr. Daniels," Linda said, her voice sweet yet sharp. "We need to talk, right now." From that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. Marcus kept his body relaxed, but his eyes remained fixed. He had seen that posture before, in danger zones, in field operations, in meetings where lives were at stake. The only difference now was that he stood in front of his home, in slippers, with his wife and child watching. Linda stopped just a meter away. Behind her, the 2 uniformed men positioned themselves like celebrity security guards, one to the left, one to the right. Neither dared look him in the eye. They were tense, amateurs. "These are officers from Neighborhood Compliance Enforcement," Linda said, pointing lightly to the men. "They're here to make sure the rules of the community are enforced, strictly." Marcus raised an eyebrow but remained silent. "We have received multiple complaints. Untrimmed trees, exposed equipment, garage open more than 15 minutes last night, and a behavior considered intimidating to certain neighbors. That violates our HOA code, Section 12C. "And what does that have to do with these 2? Marcus asked, gesturing to the officers. One of them, taller and visibly nervous, answered in a poorly rehearsed tone, "We are a division authorized by the HOA. You must accompany us to the HOA administrative headquarters." Marcus smiled, a cold, humorless smile. "Show me your identification. Name, license number, registering agency, and a warrant if you have one." The man hesitated, pulling a black wallet from his pocket. A plastic badge with gold letters, but with no state seal, No registration numbers, no barcode. Just plastic authority. Marcus studied it with the eyes of someone who had decoded worse lies. He knew this was not legitimate, not illegal in a formal sense, just a performance, but dangerous. "You are interfering with the HOA's procedure," the second man said, more aggressively. "We can detain you for obstructing community authority." The word echoed down the sidewalk like a misplaced gunshot. "Detain him?" "Detain me?" Marcus repeated as though testing the water. "Yes, sir," Linda interjected. "If you don't cooperate, we'll have to take measures. This community has standards, and no one is exempt. Not even you." Neighbors began to emerge discreetly from their homes. Some watched behind curtains. Others held up phones. Curiosity was becoming alarm. Denise, still on the porch, gripped her son's hand. Elijah watched silently, stunned. "So that's it?" Marcus spoke louder. "You're here to arrest me because I left my garage open?" "No joking about HOA rules," Linda responded, her smile fading. "Nobody is above them." "Not even you," he said, staring into her eyes. For a moment time froze. In the thick silence, one thing became clear to all who watched. This was not about a garage or untrimmed trees. It was about control, power, and what happens when someone tries to intimidate the wrong person. Within minutes, quiet Willow Creek Drive became the scene of an uncomfortable spectacle. Doors cracked open, curious eyes peered from windows, and phones rose like beacons, ready to record every second. "They're filming," whispered the shorter officer to Linda. "Good," she replied without hesitation. "Let everyone see who really causes problems in this community." Marcus held his ground, motionless, like a living statue between the two fake agents. Inside, however, he scanned the environment like an expert in behavioral analysis. He watched neighbors' faces, camera angles, the growing nervousness of the men before him. This wasn't a mere approach. It was a public performance, a judgment without a judge, but with an audience. "Marcus!" a voice cried from across the street. Tom Alvarez, a longtime neighbor and ex-military, had emerged, phone in hand. "You okay?" Marcus nodded, but Linda cut him off. "This is an HOA internal matter, Mr. Alvarez. Please stay inside your property." Tom did not reply. He only raised his own phone and began recording. Linda turned back to Marcus with a rigid smile. "Mr. Daniels, this is your last chance. You must voluntarily submit to the HOA admin office for clarification. Otherwise, you will be escorted." "Escorted by whom?" Marcus asked louder. "Two men with no legal ID, no court order, and no law enforcement presence? Is this a kidnapping dressed up as a rule enforcement?" The impostors exchanged uneasy glances. The taller one gripped a radio clipped to his shoulder, one with no wires, no signal. A prop. From a house nearby, Sarah Jensen, mother of 3, yelled out, "Is this legal? Do they have permission to do this?" "Of course we do," Linda answered without hesitation. "It's all in the community regulation." "That's not lawful authority, Linda," Tom retorted. "You're insane!" Marcus cleared his throat. "Let me ask one thing. What jurisdiction code do you operate under? Where is your division's headquarters? How many community approaches have you done this month?" Silence. Linda began to tremble. The two men looked around as though seeking an escape. "Can I call a lawyer?" Marcus asked dramatically. "Or are we now in a private HOA republic?" Laughter rippled among neighbors. Sarah chuckled nervously. Tom smiled. Someone said, "This is ridiculous." Marcus didn't laugh. His eyes continued cutting across the scene, recording everything. He knew once laughter begins, fear shifts sides. And that was exactly what he intended. Sarah's phone vibrated. The live stream had begun. Someone 2 streets over had posted the video, "Man surrounded by fake security in Houston neighborhood. WTF." Viewers surged, and Linda's power show began to crumble, before cameras, before laughter, before a man who would not flinch. Marcus stepped forward, not aggressively, strategically. The slight lean of his torso, relaxed shoulders, steady gaze, as though about to ask a simple question, but one with weight. The two men reacted instinctively. The shorter one's hand moved toward his waist, but there was no weapon, just an empty tactical belt. The other placed himself between Marcus and Linda, anticipating a move that never came. Marcus smiled, quietly. "I don't like being misunderstood," he said softly but clearly. "Let me repeat, you have no legal authority. None." Linda crossed her arms. "We do. This neighborhood has rules. HOA bylaws. You signed them when you bought your home." "I signed them, yes," Marcus affirmed, "and I read them 3 times. Do you know what they don't allow? Detention, coercion, physical approach by non-state actors. What you're doing, it isn't community policy, it's abuse, and it has a name: false public authority." The words landed like hammers on concrete. Tom, across the street, murmured to his wife, "He knows exactly what he's doing." Linda inhaled sharply, lost her authoritative glare momentarily, regained it, tried to press forward again. "Mr. Daniels, if you continue obstructing HOA procedures, you'll face disciplinary actions, fines, home sanctions, and if needed, escorted to the association headquarters." Marcus frowned, as if hearing something absurd. "Home sanctions? Escort? Linda, are you hearing yourself?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably, cameras still rolling. A teen ahead murmured, "This is so wrong." The shorter officer advanced a step, raised his arm toward Marcus. "Sir, please come with us now, or we'll have to—" Marcus took a half step back, not from fear but in calculation, and calmly said, "If you put your hand on me, that's assault without authority, actionable under civil and criminal law. And at least 7 cameras are capturing this right now, including mine." He subtly pointed to a tiny recorder clipped under his shirt collar, a concealed high-definition live recorder. Silence. The man froze. Linda stuttered. "This is intimidation," she spat. "No," Marcus answered calmly. "It's defense. It's knowledge. And you should know the difference." He then crossed his arms and stepped back, moving closer to Denise and Elijah, positioned himself between them and the imposters. "Do you really want to do this? Here? With everyone watching?" Linda's face reddened. The imposters shifted nervously. The line between authority and charade was about to snap. The silence over the street was thick, heavy, nearly palpable. Even the birds seemed to fall quiet. Phones still streamed, eyes still fixed. But there was something new. Fear. Not fear of Marcus. Fear of what the situation had become. The taller impostor broke the silence, his voice trembling between bravado and uncertainty. "This isn't a debate. Either you cooperate, or you'll be detained." The words struck like a gunshot. Detained. By who? Marcus responded immediately, acidly. 2 cardboard actors with plastic badges? The man advanced. He extended his arm quickly and tried to grab Marcus's forearm. Marcus moved away with a subtle pivot. No violence, no aggression, just technique. That slight motion was enough to throw the impostor off balance. He stumbled, nearly tripped over his own boot. A collective murmur erupted from the neighbors. A woman yelled. A man cursed. The live stream hit over 2,000 viewers. "He tried to assault him," someone cried. Denise, holding Elijah, screamed, "Enough! This had crossed every line!" Yet Marcus held his ground. Didn't respond with anger, didn't raise his voice. He simply spoke, slowly, looking straight at the man who attempted contact. "Try again, and I will treat that as a real threat. You won't like my response." The second impostor, until then quiet, drew a heavy flashlight from his side and took a step forward, raising it as if it were a weapon. The light flickered in his hand. "Back off!" he yelled. Marcus advanced a step, arms open, in quiet defiance. "You'll use that on me, in front of the cameras, on an unarmed resident? You'll commit a federal crime live on camera?" The flashlight trembled more in his grip. "Then use it," Marcus whispered. "Show me what you're made of." The man froze. His eyes darted among phones, faces, the sweat on his brow. He lowered the flashlight slowly, as though waking from a trance. Linda shouted, "They are just following HOA protocol. You're escalating this, Marcus. You're making this happen." No one believed it. No one. Now Marcus delivered the final blow, not with volume, but precision. "Linda, name the attorney who drafted the regulation you keep invoking." Just the name. One name. Silence. Linda could not respond. "Do you know why? Because that regulation was copied from the internet, altered by you, never legally validated. I've read the original. And yours. And I've got copies." A neighbor started clapping, ironically. Another shouted, "This is a joke!" Linda attempted to speak, but her voice lacked power, control, credibility. She took a step back. Marcus, still calm, said the line that would be forever embedded. "The difference between power and authority is that authority doesn't have to shout." The atmosphere at Willow Creek Drive was no longer quiet tension. It was restrained revolt. What began as a strange confrontation between a homeowner and the HOA had become a public struggle for truth and justice. "Enough!" yelled Tom Alvarez, crossing the street with his phone still recording. "This has gone too far. Linda, are you out of your mind?" "Mr. Alvarez, please return to your property," Linda snapped, voice sharper than authoritative. But Tom didn't stop. He pointed toward the two men in black. "These guys are not officials. I served 14 years in the military. No real agency operates like this. This is a cheap show." Neighbors began pouring out of their houses. Sarah Jensen, phone in hand, stood in the middle of the street. "If this is legal, why not call real police?" Marcus remained still, arms crossed, absorbing it all. "You all saw what happened," he addressed the crowd. "They tried to grab me, threatened me with a flashlight like it was a weapon. All over— What? Me leaving my garage open?" "This is abuse of power," someone shouted. "This is racism disguised as regulation," yelled another. Linda tried to rally control. She pulled out her black folder, brandished plastic laminated pages, and began reciting parts of the purported regulation. No one listened. No one believed. The black SUV used by the impostors stood still at the street entrance. Someone approached, took a picture of the license plate. Another filmed inside the vehicle. No official insignia, just generic equipment, and revealingly a box of identical plastic badges like the ones the men wore. Pressure came from all sides. "I called 911, said Sarah, glancing at Marcus. "Police are on the way." The impostors exchanged panicked looks. The taller one drifted toward the car, but Marcus took 2 steps forward, calm but assertive. "Too late now," he said. "You wanted a corrective action? You'll get one. From someone who actually has authority." Linda began to sweat. Hands shook. She fumbled to call someone, but the signal was weak, or her fingers trembled too much. "This is a respectful community," she shouted desperately. "I won't let you destroy it with hysteria." "Community of respect?" Marcus retorted. "So why do you need phantom security agents to feel in control?" A hum of assent rippled through the crowd. A retired woman, usually quiet, stepped out and said, "I knew something about your presidency was too authoritarian. Never thought I'd see this. It's shameful." Sirens wailed in the distance. Blue lights flashed at the end of the street. True authority was arriving, and with it, the truth would shift the entire neighborhood upside down. The red and blue lights reflected off windows on Willow Creek Drive like the street had become a crime scene. 2 police patrol cars screeched in and blocked the black SUV the impostors arrived in. Two uniformed Houston officers stepped out with unwavering authority, hands on hips, eyes alert, posture trained. A third plainclothes officer emerged from a vehicle behind. The crowd of over 20 residents automatically stepped back, forming a human corridor between Marcus and the police. "What's happening here?" demanded the lead officer, looking at the two men in black. Linda rushed to him, anxious to regain control. "Thank goodness you arrived. This resident is being aggressive toward HOA representatives. They were merely enforcing corrective measures." The officer raised a hand to stop her. "Ma'am, I need these two men to present official identification. State license. Security registration." The impostors glanced at each other, panic mounting. The shorter one attempted to produce the plastic badge, but the officer refused to accept it. "That's invalid," he said, staring into the man's eyes. "Full name, company name, state security license number." Silence. The second impostor tried to speak. "We are contracted by the Homeowners Association. Our role is private enforcement." "What you performed was a public act," answered the second officer. "Very public." He turned to Marcus. "Sir, are you resident of this home?" "I am," Marcus replied calmly, "and I have everything recorded. Attempted assault, intimidation, no warrant, no legal authority." The officer nodded. One went over to the SUV, inspected its interior, and returned with a somber expression. "This is fraud. SIM equipment, unsigned papers, generic badges. Someone's going to answer for this." Linda tried to interject. "They are hired. We used a private community compliance company. It's allowed by our bylaws." "Which company?" the officer asked. Linda faltered. I have the name at home. Need to check." "Check now," he insisted, in a voice that brooked no delay. While Linda scurried away, Marcus stood tall. One of the officers approached him in a low voice. "Mr. Daniels, I understand you may prefer not to reveal further identity, but for the record, the way you handled that situation was exemplary." Marcus nodded. A faint smile touched his lips. "They called in the federal—" the officer began, then paused. He was testing ground, trying to confirm a suspicion. "No need," Marcus replied, his gaze on the two men being detained. The mask fell at just the right moment. The officer nodded slowly. He now believed. Marcus Daniels was not just a well-informed resident. He was someone with discipline, training, and power beyond what most would guess. The impostors were handcuffed on the spot, under discreet applause from the neighborhood. Sarah, still live streaming, turned her camera inward. They're arresting them. This was real. Oh my God. But what no one realized, not even Sarah broadcasting in real time, was this was only the surface. The deeper truths of Marcus Daniels were yet to emerge. The clang of handcuffs echoed sharply as the two impostors' wrists were restrained. That metallic click merged with the relieved and stunned gasps from neighbors. The SUV they'd arrived in was locked down by officers treating it as a crime scene. Meanwhile, behind the crowd, neighbors watched in silent awe, as though they had just witnessed the collapse of an invisible empire. Linda, once confident, now sat on the curb, flanked by officers reviewing papers she barely managed to hold. Her hands shook. Her voice, once sharp, was now a fragmented whisper. I didn't know they weren't licensed. I hired the company by recommendation," she mumbled, eyes fixed downward like a child caught in deception. One officer, stern, addressed her. "You authorized two men without license or DPS registration to conduct residential interventions, under false symbols implying official authority? Do you understand the gravity of that?" Linda offered no defense. She merely nodded, mumbling, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Meanwhile, Marcus stood by the gate, arms crossed beside Denise and Elijah. His calmness contrasted starkly with the chaos. He did not appear relieved, rather like a sentinel watching the final act unfold. The officer who had recognized him approached quietly. "Mr. Daniels," he said softly, "you don't have to identify more than necessary, but your conduct was exemplary." Marcus simply nodded, allowing the acknowledgement. A faint curve of a smile appeared. "Have they called in federal authorities?" the officer asked, then cut himself off. He was probing, testing, trying to confirm what he already suspected. "No need," Marcus said, watching the impostors being led away. The mask dropped at the exact moment it had to. The officer nodded again, now more certain. This wasn't just a civil dispute. This was someone trained in power and restraint. Inside houses, neighbors whispered, puzzled. "Did you see that?" He quoted statutes, addressed procedure. "Who is this man?" "I don't know," said Tom, "but he's not just another homeowner. That's certain." Police collected statements, confiscated the props used by the impostors, and filed a report for false personation of authority, coercion, and possible private kidnapping. The street slowly returned to daily life, but nothing would ever be the same. Marcus entered the house silently. He crossed the porch, walked through the door, and closed it with a soft click. But before fully disappearing, he turned toward the neighbors and said, "This was just the surface." And then he vanished from their view. In the days that followed, Magnolia Grove was blanketed by silence and speculation. News of the impostor's arrest spread like wildfire. Sarah's video exceeded 500,000 views on Instagram and was reshared across TikTok, Facebook, and other platforms with captions like, "Black man intimidated by fake cops, but completely flips the script. They tried to arrest the wrong guy. He knew every law. They crumbled." But inside the community, the question became different. Who was Marcus Daniels really? 2 days after the incident, Officer Bradley Moore, the one who had recognized Marcus, received a call from the Department of Justice, specifically from a secure line at the FBI's regional office in Dallas. "Is Agent Daniels active?" asked the voice on the other end. Moore hesitated. "He didn't officially identify himself, but we know. By how he handled it, by his precision." "Confirm or deny nothing," the voice replied. "Just stay silent. And if anything else happens, inform us." Moore hung up and exhaled. Marcus Daniels was not merely a well-informed civilian. He was someone far above what was immediately visible. Meanwhile, within the HOA, residents began convening informally. Anger, confusion, and fear mixed. Tom revealed something he had kept. "You know, Marcus filed a formal petition to review all HOA contracts 6 months ago." "How so?" Sarah asked. "He demanded to see financial records, payments to contractors, audit reports. He suspected phantom services. The request was denied." "He did it quietly?" "He did, legally, by the bylaws." Another neighbor, Derek, chimed in. "I heard he also went to the county office to request copies of the security company's registration. And you think that ties into that day?" They exchanged silent looks. Yes, it was absolutely connected. Marcus had not only been a questioning resident, he was investigating, thoroughly, legally, silently. And Linda. She was now realizing she had antagonized someone she never truly understood. Later that day, Linda received a court summons from the district court. Based on evidence assembled from police records and the videos taken, the local prosecutor had launched a formal inquiry against her for administrative misconduct, irregular security contracts, and intimidation of residents. At the top of the complaint sheet, the name highlighted was Marcus D., External Investigative Consultant. It was then Linda understood she never had control. She only thought she did. For nearly 2 years, Marcus Daniels lived in Magnolia Grove as an ordinary man. He greeted neighbors, maintained his home, took Elijah to school, shopped locally. He was invisible to most, and that was by design. What no one knew, not even Denise, his spouse, nearly his confidant, was that Marcus operated on a deeper mission, an undercover mission authorized by federal intelligence. Marcus Daniels was an FBI agent, not a common one. He was involved in investigations of public corruption, private militias, fraudulent government contracts. He had dismantled extortion rings in New York, infiltrated extremist groups in Arizona, and exposed money laundering through phantom NGOs in California. He thrived in operating without fanfare, no flashy badges, no weapons on his belt. His power came through information, tactical intelligence, and the ability to become what no one expects, just another face. That invisibility allowed Marcus to detect irregularities in Magnolia Grove, phantom companies, contractors without registration, services paid for but never delivered. But it was not purely about money, it was about psychological dominance. A model being deployed across HOAs in Texas and neighboring states, control dressed up as governance. Linda Whitaker was not a lone tyrant. She was a pawn in a much larger system. Marcus had been planted there on a mission: expose the model, document abuse, incite revelation. And it worked. The sun was low over Houston when Marcus walked down Willow Creek Drive. He wore a light blue button shirt, dark jeans, quiet shoes. Everything about him looked unremarkable, except the look in his eyes. Endgame. Linda waited on a concrete bench in the community garden. No crowd, no cameras, just silence, and the weight of consequences in the air. She wore dark sunglasses even though the sun had dimmed. Her face was thinner. Her hands gripped a trembling stack of papers. Marcus stopped in front of her. He did not sit. He stood, grounded, calm, unwavering. "So," Linda said without meeting his eyes, "this was all a plan of yours from the start?" "No," he replied. "It was your own ego's design. I simply watched as you unraveled." Linda removed her sunglasses slowly. Bloodshot eyes stared at him. "You destroyed my reputation. The HOA demands my resignation. My sister won't talk to me. My children are under attack online." Marcus crossed his arms. "And how many people have you destroyed, Linda? How many residents silenced, intimidated? How many fined illegally? How many made to feel unwelcome?" She hesitated. "I just wanted to maintain order." "No," he interrupted. "You wanted power. Small, petty power disguised as leadership, and you couldn't handle when someone refused to bow." Linda clenched the papers tighter. "You're FBI, aren't you?" Marcus did not respond. He simply looked at her, letting silence confirm what needed no words. "Will you arrest me?" "No," he said. "That's for prosecutors, for the residents, for the system you tried to control with fear." She looked at him in a mix of anger, sorrow, shock. "You pretended to be one of us." Marcus stepped closer, eyes locked. "I am one of you, more than you ever were." He turned, then paused as she asked, "Why did you do it this way? Why not just denounce me? Why wait?" Marcus tilted his face slightly, not meeting her eyes directly. "True authority doesn't shout. It observes. It acts, and waits for the right moment to reveal itself." He left her there, not with vengeance, but with justice mirrored in the reflection of her own constructs. Some months have passed since the sound of cuffs, the cameras rolling, and the truth coming into the open. Magnolia Grove changed. The HOA was restructured. A new board, elected by engaged residents, began reviewing every clause of the bylaws. Contracts were audited, documents made public, and most importantly, the community regained its voice. Linda Whitaker formally resigned. Her name became a footnote in the HOA's history. She moved away quietly, leaving no farewells. Her house, once the symbol of control, became just another residence on the block. Marcus Daniels remained, No longer invisible, but not seeking the limelight either. He joined community meetings, helped with neighborhood security, offered guidance when requested. He became respected, quietly, the kind of presence that provides calm even in silence. One Saturday morning, during a community coffee gathering, Tom approached him. "You know, Marcus, it's still hard believing you were among us the whole time, and nobody had any idea." Marcus smiled, sipping his coffee. Sometimes the best way to understand the world is by being part of it. No uniform, no badge, just being one of us. Tom asked, "Now that it's over, is your mission done?" Marcus looked toward Elijah playing in the park, Denise chatting with neighbors, and said, "Some missions never truly end. They just change form." As life resumed in the community, the story continued circulating online. Comments, analysis, reaction videos. Many saw it as a warning about misused power. Others saw a model of silent resistance. But for those who lived it up close, the lesson was deeper. True authority doesn't impose. It inspires, it doesn't dominate, it protects. And the gravest mistake is confusing silence with submission.